is there. I see
Rob is here, yes.
Are we ready to go?
I'm just starting up the live stream now, if you're ready.
Thank you, sir. If you would. See how everybody falls in line, behaving themselves? Sorry, Rob?
To go, Mr.
We're
Chair.
good to go now.
We're good to go. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's December 1st, first day of December. Yay! The skiers are going to be very happy, and as well the snowmobilers, right? Okay, so this is a meeting of the Hanover-Owen Sound Task Force, December 1st, 2020. Madam Clerk, attendance?
We have all members here with the exception of Warden McQueen, and I will inform the task force when he does arrive.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we have an agenda before us. Item 2, is there any declaration of interest? Seeing none, we'll proceed. If one should arise, I would ask you to declare it at that time. And item number 3, I guess we're turning to Randy. It's business arising and a review of the work to date.
Great, thank you, Chair Hicks, and good morning, everyone. So as we've been doing after each meeting, we've been summarizing some of the recommendations and opportunities that have followed each of the discussion around each of the key themes that that this task force identified early on as of interest to this task force. So we've done that. So starting at page 9 was the some of the recommendations and opportunities that came into the discussion from the last meeting, which was around mental health and addictions. So I'll just go through and touch on some of the highlights from that meeting. There was a theme around, of course, housing, and housing, of course, is a key theme that comes up in each of the meetings in terms of the need for more accessible, affordable housing. And the note around mental health and addictions is a need for again, access to affordable, stable housing in a large factor in maintaining that high quality of life and success in achieving substance abuse recovery. It was also noted that there's a need for temporary shelters. Grey Bruce Health Services, it was noted that they have 45 inpatient beds with many patients using the beds because they have no housing options with proper supports surrounding those housing I think is a key item to also address. Aging in place is another concern that was identified due to lack of supports and appropriate housing, for example, 24-hour care. It was noted during the discussions that 50% of the inpatient beds provided by Grey Bruce Health Services are being used while waiting for long-term care beds. So some of the recommendations and opportunities that's spin out of that discussion, of course, there's the Affordable Housing Action Plan that's been developed by the Affordable Housing Task Force, which is another task force that's been set up by the county. Hopefully this will help to address some of the challenges regarding lack of affordable housing. However, we did note that levels of support to assist people in maintaining their housing is also required. The redevelopment of Rockwood Terrace in Durham, along with additional lands acquired in Durham, could be used to create senior housing options, which is currently being investigated by the county at this time. And then, of course, the announcement last week, the additional long-term care beds recently announced by the province for Grey Gables in Markdale may also help to address some of the needs identified. The next area of this discussion in terms of recommendations and opportunities was around program and service integration. And there was talk about the creation, of course, of the Grey Bruce Ontario health teams, and the integration of mental health supports into it is meant to provide a more integrated model for service delivery that's hopefully will be easier for clients to use. We noted the need to continue to stay engaged with the Ontario Health team that's being established in this area and ensuring that the matters related to mental health issues and substance abuse issues are being addressed locally. There was also talk about important partnerships within the community working together, such as the opioid working group, to meet clients where they are and provide much needed supports. There is also a growing trend to engage persons with addictions in the development of programs related to substance abuse. And there was a recent Peterborough model that was highlighted as an example of such a program. There was also talk about the need for the creation of wraparound team of supportive programs and relationship building and peer-to-peer supports. And there was also noted a need to build outreach resources in local communities to assist with people who are in need of help in the moment. There was also the idea of the use of a situation table to bring various groups together to work on issues. I think Barb Fetty noted that the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan has just been prepared, which identifies areas of risk and concern and offers recommendations to address some of these challenges. And then, we just raised questions, is there a role for council advocacy to secure resources from other levels of government to support some of these needs and challenges? Is there a need for funding for more supportive housing? We also provided the link to that Peterborough example, that model that was identified as part of the discussion. We also had a presentation from Kevin McNabb, our Director of Paramedic Services, and he outlined a number of data and analysis with respect to the number of people that may need additional mental health and addiction services supports when they respond to a call for service. So we identified that there may be further insights we can gather from this data that will provide insights into the frequency of those calls. I think Kevin identified that they're typically, when a call is being made, they're more of a reactive stage, and seeing if there are elements that we can pull maybe from that data to see if we can be more proactive by identifying, say, individuals or locations where there are frequency of 911 calls. We also made a connection with Alison Govier, who was one of the presenters last week, or 2 weeks ago, from the Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy, to see what data they have as well, that we could maybe gain some further insights for the final report. There was also discussion around planning and transportation and the need for more urban planning design to create healthy and happy communities. And because research shows that obviously there's a direct relationship between the environment we live in and our mental health. And we just noted that some of the Live Grey policies in the county's new official plan identify some of the importance of creating healthy communities through design. And we actually partnered with the Grey Bruce Health Unit in Bruce County to create a healthy development checklist. And we put a link to that document in the recommendations and opportunities document. And this is a tool to help guide healthy community development. And what we have identified as part of the next steps is to integrate some of those concepts into local official plans and to work with developers to ensure that new developments integrate these concepts into the design. There's also talk about transportation planning, which is another key thread or theme that comes up in each of the meetings in terms of providing access to social supports, as well as recreational services. So obviously we've got the new transit system that is providing some further access, but we've just identified and flagged some questions around, do the existing bus routes serve the populations and geographies that are most high in need? Are there additional opportunities, including stops, for example, at recreational facilities such as the Y, as this is viewed as an added support for youth when aiming to achieve health equity for all? And then there's the theme around programs and funding needs. And it was noted that there's an incidence of sexual assaults has increased significantly in Grey Bruce area, especially as part of the pandemic and lockdown, and work on protecting and enhancing mental health needs to start with children to assist in laying the groundwork for success later in life. It was noted that there are 2 mental health pediatric beds at Grey Bruce Health Services, and there was questions around whether or not there's a need for a hub locally rather than sending youth to the London area, and identify what resources are required to create such a hub and then explore funding options. We also noted that rural Ontario needs more funding from other levels of government for various areas of mental health and addiction supports, of course, focusing on the most vulnerable population. And there was also talk around the need for safe supply of drugs offered through a physician. But it was noted that it must be done in a logical way, with perhaps larger centers offering this program first before smaller centers. And there was also a note that area doctors want to see gaps in services filled before moving on to a safe supply program. So those are some of the notes that we captured as part of the discussion and some of the recommendations and opportunities that we can explore further as part of the final report. That is the final piece of these meetings that we're having with the task force, and happy to take any questions or if there's anything that we missed as part of those.
Thank you, Randy. Whose ever idea it was to have this embedded into the agenda, great idea. I really like starting off the meetings with these sort of reviews. So you get the information, you have a chance to absorb it, and then come back at it in this manner. Excellent. Council members, any thoughts, any input? Okay, then we will move on. We do not have Andrea Riley here today, but we will move on to Barb Feedy, who will be giving us a social services overview. And I see that Stephanie and Savannah have joined us. Welcome to the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good morning. I can't hear you terribly well yet, Barb. I hear you faintly.
Okay, let me try this again.
There you go. That sounds better.
Is that better?
That is better, yes. Oh, you're gone again.
How about that? Any better?
That's great. That's better. Yeah.
Okay. You let me know if I'm fading out.
Yeah, you still are fading. You go loud and then soft and then loud again.
Try that. Is that better?
That's much better. Yes.
I don't know. Every time I try this, it's something else. Okay. So good morning. And I just need to apologize up front that I'll have to leave the meeting before it ends. I'm double booked and it's happening to all of us, I know. We were attending, Sarah and myself, Sarah Cowley and myself attended Owen Sound City Council last night to present the Community Safety and Wellbeing launch. And we're at Town of Blue at 10 o'clock. So I'll be a little bit late joining them. So I'm going to try and share my screen and present to you the Ontario Works and Social Services update. Everybody can see that? Good. Okay, so just a bit of an update on what social services does here in Grey County. We are the Consolidated Municipal Service Manager for OW, Children's Services, and the Early On. This next slide talks a little bit about what we do for Ontario Works, how we provide our assistance, where we're located. We've got some satellite offices. Right now, we have about 1,150 cases. We don't include our temp care cases when we look at these cases because we're trying to look at this as an economic program to support people to become sustainable. The temp care we carve off a little bit, knowing we have to support families who have the children placed in their care. So if you look at our caseload right now, there's about 1,150 in, that's benefit units. That's not individuals, that is a benefit unit. You can see the funding that's been provided and works itself through to about $1,613 per case impact to the levy. You can see the levy that's changed there. For 19, it was 1.93 million. For 20, it was 1.77. And for 21, we're anticipating 1.86. Little bit of a caseload increase is what we're anticipating, but also recognizing that costs are going up for families that are on our benefits. Next slide includes some comparisons. We thought we'd throw in a couple different municipalities so you could see the trends. Things are going down. Our caseload, touchy today. The caseloads are trending down across the province, and we are seeing similar trends here in that what's happened is we've carved off for the most part, the children out of the caseload. There was a commitment several years ago to increase the child tax benefits and other benefits to families so that the children wouldn't be living below the poverty line like they had been. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're still seeing, especially in Grey Bruce, lots of families with children living below the poverty line. But caseload for Ontario Works, the demographics certainly have shifted over the years. I've been in this almost 3 decades, and my caseload when I was a frontline caseworker was a majority of families. We're now a majority of singles, and those singles are coming with a lot of barriers. And we're talking about some of those today. And certainly Randy's summary talked about some of the barriers that people are seeing here in Grey County. Applications. So this is just a comparison of what the applications are looking like. You can see they're trending downward. This is artificial. This is about the CERB and the CRB subsequent benefit. We're a little bit leery about what will happen when that ends. The extension to June gives us some reprieve, but we know there is those positions that are not currently faring very well during the pandemic. They're going to be hard to come back to. And so we're trying to do some planning. We're working with our colleagues across the province and certainly with our labor colleagues to determine what this looks like and how do we build programs right now that people can prepare for. ODSP, I wanted you to know about the ODSP caseload as well and how it's trending up. You can see that they're across the province, certainly in all over the province. We've been estimating that these cases are going to continue to climb. It's one of the reasons why there is some Ontario Works, and it's actually a social assistance, so it's OW and ODSP. Modernization is underway. It's a behemoth, and there's an expectation that unless we can support the people that are on ODSP, they just get parked there. And we really do need to find a way and means to support not only the person with the disabilities, but also the family members, the non-disabled participants. They need to be supported. There's training programs, the employment transformation piece that I'm going to speak to. There are programs embedded in that, and those folks, my staff will be working with. So next slide. Let me see, why are you moving? There we go. This just gives you a bit of a background as to why people apply. That first one that's blank, that's just simply there are too many. I did go a little deeper to ask my staff why that's sitting as blank. It's not blank. There are a number of reasons why people are applying. This is one where it's not specific to one category. So if someone is applying and they have multiple barriers, or there's a number of reasons how they landed in our intake, that's the category that our staff choose. It's not ideal, and we're working on streamlining it because we need to drill down further and really find out what the real issues are. Come on.
But can you
yeah.
go back to the last slide? The words are very small for me,
okay.
anyways, to read on my iPad.
Sorry.
But maybe you could just mention some of the to the left there, first few categories.
Absolutely. So the second highest is inability to obtain employment, and that's at 421. So you can see out of the total, we have 421 cases. They're looking for work. They can't find the work. The highest was 611, but as I explained, it's not that there isn't a reason, it's because they have multiple reasons. You can see a very small caseload of 60 where we have temp care. Those are the folks who are with us who have had kin placed with them, and they're looking after the children. And then it continues to decline in income less than budget. So there is some money coming in, but they don't have enough to support themselves, unable to work for temporary reasons, EI is exhausted. And then long-term disability, there's that 30, that number 30 is the long-term where we are helping people to secure their ODSP or other Canada pension disability benefits. And then it continues to decrease after that. But again, what I would say is that first one needs more clarity because we do know people are coming to us with multiple barriers. Okay. This is the municipality. This just speaks to where the cases are. So Owen Sound has 659 cases. That is because this is where the services are and this is where the housing is. Certainly the demographics and the population. You'll see West Grey and Hanover, one case apart when we took this snapshot. And that's simply because that's our second largest populated area, which is why we're having these conversations today. That's where services are, that's where housing is. And so we recognize that people need to access services. They don't always have the transportation. In fact, very rarely do they. And so they find they're needing to live where the services are, so that they can be accessed easily or more easily. These two slides that I brought in were actually slides Randy has shared in the past. I just thought they were important to keep along with the OW information that I'm sharing with you today. And it's just the breakdown of the caseload, the education, the male to female comparisons. And you'll see that that female comparison is greater than the male. And that's a new trend. That's not historically how our caseload looked. And so you can also see how long people are staying on assistance. This was meant as a temporary program. This was supposed to help people in between being self-sustaining. So this indicates that people have a lot going on in their lives. And if they could, they wouldn't be on assistance. No one wants to be poor. No one wants to be in a situation where they're depending on a program to meet their needs. And it's not meeting their needs. It's supposed to be a safety net so that you don't fall through the cracks. But we do have people living and finding a way to live on it because they just aren't able to sustain themselves.
So
And
Bart,
again, yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to take you back to that previous slide. There was a,
Yeah.
No, the previous to that. There we go. So I wanted, nope, that one. The caseload per population by municipality.
Mhm.
You skipped over that, but what, tell me about that one.
So this was prepared by Brad, and I think what he was getting at, he's our data analyst, and he just wanted folks to see what the population is so in Hanover, 3% of your population, or sorry, Owen Sound, 3% of the population is living on in receipt of social assistance. And in Hanover, almost 2% are in receipt of social assistance. So it's giving you a bird's eye view of what your population looks like. Now, keep in mind, this is just OW. I do speak in a few minutes to the combined cases of ODSP and OW, because that's important.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair,
Chair, it's
I
Brian.
just will note that Warden McQueen has joined us.
Well, thank you. Welcome, Warden McQueen.
Good morning. Sorry I was a little late. We got hammered here with snow.
You're blowing snow, we understand.
I'll bring you some.
Did I hear another voice
Yeah,
join in?
Mr. Chair, it's Brian. Can I just
Brian.
speak to this? So with Owen Sound at 3% of the population, what is our target? Like what's a comfortable percentage? Because, you know, we go all the way down to 0.26.
Brian, it really goes back to the services, right? I don't know that there is a target. I think what happens is folks co-share housing. They are looking for, we do have a number of low-income housing units in the city as well as compared to some of the smaller municipalities or the rural municipalities. And so that goes back to accessing what they can for medical appointments. It's about how people can find a way to meet their needs.
I find I find this data fascinating. Like, does it change daily or weekly or monthly or? Like,
yeah,
really?
Brian, it's a snapshot in time, and we can go back. So today, my staff will be looking at the October stats. November's won't show up until probably middle of December.
Okay.
We can go in and pull some data, but it's not as accurate as it would be a few days into the next month because there are things that are happening. There are people who didn't get their statement of income card in, so their check is delayed. There are some holds by the caseworkers because they're waiting for information. So to really get the accurate information, we have to look backwards. The province is doing some good work at getting us tools now to be able to do to be able to extract the data a whole lot easier than we've ever been able to do before. We're going to have a dashboard that gives us the data across the province so we can do these comparisons without having to do a lot of manual work or at least pulling the data into something we can work with. And we'll be able to provide these almost instant. We'll be able to have much more ground level data. As I said, that piece about knowing why people are on assistance is so very, very important because we have to be able to target our supports to the individual benefit unit. What I might need will be very different than what my neighbor might need. And so without being able to know it's just a standard case, and nothing is standard. So more information to come on that.
Thanks, Barb.
Okay. And so this again goes back to when I mentioned the more females than males. That that's a different trend. We have traditionally been working with a group. I would say the caseload was a 60-40 split, mostly males between the ages of 19 and 45. And so you can see that that's a very different look at this point in time. We do have people who have postgraduates. We have people who don't have a diploma. It isn't a one shop fits all. There are lots of reasons why people need some temporary assistance. Same with the Hanover caseload. So Hanover and Owen Sound are similar in those natures. This map, I'm sorry, it's so small, and I'm going to skip it because all it does is show you where the left is OW and the right is ODSP. This is the joint map, and I thought it was important to show you. It doesn't mean that there are no cases over here in Blue Mountains. It just means that those postal codes got pulled into the Meaford area. So the cases are, it's a little tricky to be able to determine where the cases are, but I can tell you we have some in Town of Blue, but very few. I wanted you to see that Owen Sound, the joint ODSP and OW cases for the city of Owen Sound, it says 2276. But what you're really looking at is the surrounding area, because everybody in these three, the yellows, the purples, the oranges, they'll all be coming into Owen Sound for services. And if you look at Hanover, you're looking at 551, but really you have to look all around to say who's coming in for services. So it's not just about who lives in your town and where we're pulling the stats from with your postal codes. It's a deeper reach than that for people that need assistance that come into communities. Okay. So for ODSP, this is the criteria that people are determined for disability. They go through an adjudication process. And I wanted you to know that there are almost 400,000 cases of ODSP in Ontario at this time. So there's 380,000 cases, and this is trending upwards. And like I said,
Barb?
until this, yes.
Isn't it, it's true, just for the committee's background knowledge or whatever, that this is not a trend that the province is very comfortable with?
Absolutely, Kim. So this is the whole reason why we are having an employment transformation program. So just for context, social services in Ontario Works was the employment component. We were looking at this was for people who were temporarily out of work. And Ontario Disability traditionally was, it takes a while for a process to meander its way through to disability determination. But once someone is determined disabled, they're parked there. They receive disability benefits, and there is a review every 2 years, but really the criteria for once it's so difficult to get that it's very difficult then to be moved off of. The challenge has been we have really underserved folks who get to disability because a lot of people still want to work. They have conditions, they have long-term conditions, they have disabilities that maybe prevent them from doing certain things, but they definitely would like to be employable. They'd like to have a connection to the labor force. They'd like purpose, the socialization, all of it, for all the same reasons we're at work every day too. And it's not enough money to survive on. So it's a challenge. And we also were disservicing the spouse and the children. And so we're now moving through an employment transformation. And so I think my next slide speaks to that. Not quite yet, but I will just speak a little bit more on it right now. There are the employment pieces that we have traditionally been doing in social services are being in OW are being carved out. We will be dealing with life stabilization, and life stabilization is about supporting people to become employable. We know that, and I mean, that summary Randy spoke of is exactly some of the challenges that we have for our caseload, the mental health and the addictions. And so we need to help people where they're at, meet them where they're at right now, if we have any hope of supporting them to become employable and not moving them off to a disability. We do work really hard, though, at determining if someone has a disability. My staff work very hard to get them to that benefit because it is so much more than an OW entitlement. So I'm going to speak to the entitlements in a minute. So what the trends are, of course, are the increasing length of time that people are on assistance. There is an employment working group, and we've got a new assessment tool that we're working with. We speak to the fact that ODSP caseload is growing. We've got partnerships with all kinds of agencies and organizations that are supporting us, as well as helping our clients to ensure that we can give them what they need to be able to at some point hopefully become self-sustaining. And I would just say that we have worker shortages. We know that. So what we really need to do is target our initiatives, and we do that through some pre-employment strategies and the life stabilization that we're doing through Getting Ahead and other programs and workshops. More to come on that.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, Mr. Milne.
Thank you. Barb, just on that previous slide, you talk about the implementation of community hubs, and I'm wondering, has it been cost effective in the first instance, but more importantly, has it been better for our clients, shall we say, to have the services closer to the people rather than bringing the people to the services?
Brian, that's the nail right there. That's exactly right, which is why we are out in community. And we want to partner with the mental health organizations, with employment organizations. If I can easily tell someone, here's a card, call this person, but if we're co-located, it's a one-stop shop, and the opportunity then to engage, that internal motivator is right there. And I can't say enough about being able to be out there. It's not easy. We only have 2 staff in each of those satellite locations, but when we bring our partners in, that staffs us back up. Now, of course, we're on a pause with COVID, but at the same time, trying to find a way for people to get a ride to get to a main office somewhere, that was, we get in our cars and just go. This is really a challenge just for day-to-day life. And so having those hubs has been intrinsic to the work that we do. And we share. We want our partners to come in too.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned COVID, and there's been lots of issues and restrictions because of that, but maybe there's some opportunities there too. Is there? I mean, a lot of us are maybe tired of Zoom and virtual meetings, but if our partners, i.e. community libraries or places like that, the technology, surely we can, we've got smart people like Jody on staff at the county that can make the technology work for us. So maybe we need to push a little harder on that. I don't know.
I have to say, I talked to you a little bit at the end of this report, but I would hazard to say that we actually are serving our clients better during COVID because we aren't making them come to offices. We've implemented so many pieces of technology, and we're giving them computers. We are giving them refurbished computers and phones, and we're looking at paying their wireless bills so that there is connectivity. And the isolation factor has been taken away because they can do the outreach. They can stay connected. And we can push out messaging, right? There's so much more we can do this way. It's interesting. There's a lot of resistance to this at the ministry, but once COVID came, that expedited a lot of things for us. So when you look at the silver linings, client service has definitely improved.
Boom. Microphone drop, right? Thanks, Barb.
100%. Okay, so the next piece is just about children's services, and we wanted you to know about the fee subsidy and what we do for families. And so there's a piece in here about the levy, and so it does cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to provide childcare and space for childcare. It's a complex program. I wish the province, they keep telling us they're going to deconstruct it and make it easier. That's not happening, but hopefully at some point they will. I'll take you to the next slide. This is just a map, a complicated map, but it shows you where all the daycares are located. And they're licensed daycares. You can see the Hanover and the Owen Sound is broken out a little bit. A lot of spaces available. There's the early on center map, just some locations where families can go for services. We currently still have services. We were doing lots of remote, but we are doing services in person as well, as long as they're registered and following the rules. You can see on this next slide that we partner with, the piece that you want to know about is we welcome our partnerships because we know the families need everybody around them to support them. Strong relationships with them, both through our childcare centers and our licensed home childcares. We have a capacity in Grey County for 2,000 spaces. Okay, that doesn't mean we have 2,000 kids in care right now, but we have a capacity for that. In Hanover, there are 234 spaces, and in Owen Sound, there's 877. And then we have licensed home childcare as well. So we've got 25 homes all around the county, so that if you want to choose to have your children in a home setting, we have licensed care homes. We do have some that didn't open since COVID. Okay, and so that's a bit of a challenge. We also know that we're way under capacity. We're less than half right now because of COVID. This is a childcare cost. It's eye-opening when you look at what it costs for a family. If you have 2 kids in care, 1 infant and 1 preschooler, it's going to cost you over $1,800 a month just for your childcare. That's not your mortgage, your car payment, your food, your hydro, your taxes, right? It's incredibly expensive. And the other piece that you need to know about is there is a critical shortage of our ECEs. And it's interesting because the 2 lifespans that you've heard us talk before many times on council floor about the shortage of PSWs in nursing care and long-term care and the difficulties with recruitment. This is exactly the same, but it's at the other end of the lifespan. It's at the early end of the lifespan. So very expensive. We've got some other data there for you to draw on comparison of analysis. And of course, the younger the children, the more expensive it is because you can't have as many kids per teacher, right? So some accomplishments. I've just listed a few things of how we've gone really electronic and how we work and do business now. We have that connect to text where we text our clients, they text us back. We have My Benefits where someone can load their information into an online application. They can roll up their information to their worker. It doesn't have to come by mail anymore. Reloadable payment card. We do have some very vulnerable individuals who can't get bank accounts. They don't have access to bank card. They've got a past that hasn't been great. And so we provide them with a debit card and we reload that so that they have benefits and they're not susceptible to theft or other issues. We have electronic document management. So now we have documents online and people working from home can access a file, don't have to pull those 10-pound files off shelves anymore. We're able to do all kinds of great things and keep business rolling and no interruption to service for our clients. And then we have had a loss of knowledge. I wanted you to know that. In 4 years, we've lost 60% of our staff. We've gained 60% of our staff back through new people and lots of good folks coming through the door. But there was a cohort in a unionized setting where people stay and they tend to move together until retirement. And so we've had a ton of retirements, lots of opportunity as well. And we can do things differently too as we plan with new folks coming in. We've got the data analyst on and a lot of collaboration. You'll see those tables all there. Makes me exhausted thinking about it, but it's well worth it and it's very important. And certainly you know that we do the EVAC center management. We have that part of the plan that we have to incorporate. And we work with both the City of Owen Sound and Hanover, as well as the other municipalities. COVID challenges, the staff turnover and the retirements and trying to train and onboard people. Been difficult. Transportation barriers, certainly we have the van program. Right now the van is running all kinds of product around the county and moving things for us. Not very many people are out and about going to appointments and certainly aren't in training programs. They're doing online instead. The availability of addictions and mental health, that's a challenge for us. Client getting access to services, and you've heard that before, just last time we met. Employment services transformation, that's the big piece that's moving ahead. Right now they're in the prototype phase, and how that will impact us as a life stabilization provider, we still don't know. There is no working definition of life stabilization from the province yet. It's still to come. So we're kind of in the center of this change. The centralized intake. Some of you might remember the ISU, the intake screening unit, the program, the call center that was in place a few years ago, actually 15 years ago. It's no longer an outdated memory. We're bringing it back, only with a new and fresh look at it, and people will be able to call in, and the information is being taken over the phone. It's not necessarily people in Grey County that will be taking the calls. So there's a risk base to it. People's first checks will be issued without having to see anybody or having to come to an office. That would be for folks that don't have any risks to their cases. Still, we'll continue to offer services locally as well. And then we have a new funding delivery model coming up for us next year. We don't know what that looks like. Kevin spoke to it at his report at council, where there's an expectation that we could be losing up to 20% of our program delivery funding based on all of these other changes coming together. We'll see what that looks like. And certainly I've got in here that childcare admin funding is changing, but we just got some great news on that. So more to come. We'll be updating council on that for 2021 at least. And we certainly don't know what to expect when the CERB ends. And we've got the chronic and sustained stress for all of us, right? We're all essential services, and we've all been carrying on since this started. So it's pivoting and changing and pausing and pivoting and changing. It's a bit difficult. And then responding to COVID again, how we are working outside the box. So I'm not going to go into all of that with you. I'll leave that with you. But there's been a lot going on, and some really good things have come out of it. I would highlight the last bullet on this page, which is the student nutrition program. Francesca is part of that, and she was able to reach out to us at Bruce and Gray and say to us, you know what, the kids aren't getting their food needs met in the schools now. How can we make this happen? So we've been working together and looking at our caseloads and connecting with our families and getting them the money that was previously given to the schools for food, and we're giving it directly to the families so that they have their needs met. And then this last two slides are just a list of things that we're doing differently. Our van driver delivering all kinds of interesting PPE, computer deliveries, all kinds of great things, food hampers, all of those wonderful things. Okay, questions for me?
Thank you very much, Barb. Lots of information there. Council, any questions?
I have a couple questions, Mr. Chair.
Please go right ahead.
Thank you. The first question, Barb, is one of your earlier slides there. You showed the impact on the declining applications for Ontario Works, I believe, and you alluded to that is probably a result of the CERB payments. And I'm wondering, is that a glimpse into what might happen or continue to happen if we had a guaranteed income?
That is interesting. I am a proponent of a guaranteed income, and I would argue that that's what the CERB is. And what's difficult is that the CERB is $2,000, and people who live on social assistance, I had some notes, and I'm sorry, I got right into my slides. If you're a single person, the most you can receive on social assistance is $733 a month. Okay, so when you think about the $2,000 the feds have said is something you need to live on, but we're telling someone on social assistance, here's $733, good luck. And so then if you're a couple, you get $1,136. Well, has anybody tried to rent in Grey County? It's costs more than that for a 2-bedroom or rents are so high. And if you have children, if you have 2 kids, your check would be $1,250. And now in addition, the family with the children is certainly going to fare better because they're going to have the child tax benefit. So there's, in excess of $500 coming in. in addition, mid-month, that helps. But you can see that these rates are, and there is no rate expectation. We've been told don't anticipate a rate increase coming in the budget. So we're stuck at these rates. And so that's the importance of the partners. I know Francesca's going to speak to you about a lot of the great things that her programs do, and they augment the social assistance. We're just one tiny piece of the program, but you can see the dependence on the food bank that's increasing. You can see the need to use our county transportation program. We did the pilot a couple years ago, and most of those folks were people living on low income. Now, ODSP rates are a little higher. A single person is, I believe, now over $1,100. So that's the benefit. That's why we work so hard. If someone is deemed disabled, we're going to work doubly hard to get that person onto that benefit as quick as possible. And so you can
Right.
see why the province rates are rising. Like it's not a mystery. You know,
Right.
that those
So
caseloads
I
are going
guess
to continue to climb.
right. So I guess my point is, I'm wondering, has anybody ever actually crunched the numbers to show what would happen financially for the province if we were to say have a guaranteed income of, pick a number, $2,000 a month for a single person? That's the CERB number, but do away with Ontario Works and not only just the direct payment, but the cost to administer and all the rest of it. And I'm not trying to put you out of a job, Barb, but
No, I know.
I just, I wonder, because people say to me, oh, well, guaranteed income, it's going to cost us millions of dollars. Well, I don't know if it would or not. In addition to what we're already spending, I think, in fact, it would save us money because people would have, some disposable income and give them a better life. Anyway,
Mr.
that's
Chair?
just speculation. My other question was, real quickly, was you talked about the cohort of retirees. Given all the electronic work that we're doing now to reach out to people, is there an opportunity for some of those folks to work part-time from home? I don't know. It's not for everybody, but maybe there's something there to kind of bolster your workforce. I don't know. Sorry, I rambled a bit there, but anyway, those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Kim has something to add here.
Two things. One, with regard to, moving forward to a different future, my assessment is that all of the work that they're doing now to try and centralize intake, to automate so many of these processes, renewable payment cards, all of that technology is meant to enable a different way forward should the political will be there. Up until now, I think it would have been extremely challenging to do that in a streamlined manner. But I think some of the changes that Barb's talked about today make a tremendous difference to our ability to do that and to do it well. As far as the labor force piece goes, I know that there's a future meeting where we're talking to the Workforce Planning Board, but that's why it's so important that the connections between Barb's work and Savannah's work stays strong. Where there's opportunities to help people, make a change from where they are to a different place with more paid employment in it, whatever that looks like, we want to be able to help people to have that purpose and feel some success. And so there's lots of little things that are going on right now in support of that. But Barb, you
Thank
have
you.
more information
Yes.
too.
Yeah, and I really appreciate, Kim, you've hit lots of great points there. The challenge we have is we still have pockets of people without connectivity. Like we've got wireless issues. So we have folks, so there's some haves and have-nots because they just, they're not able to access any wireless where they live. We also know that there are always going to be people that are going to need the support of a staff person. And so, we know that there's still a role. It's changing, and like I would agree that I think you've got lots of great things to think about. We'll stay very connected with Savannah's group, with Gemma at the labor force. There's just so many opportunities. We're kind of just in the center waiting for our life stabilization directions.
Councillor O'Leary, I see you have a question.
And Councillor Akesh, or Councillor Desai as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, just in addition to what Brian Milne had said, I keep trying to think that in some cases, we're going to find some positive things that are going to come out of the pandemic. But I'm looking at the $733 max that you were talking about versus the $2,000 CERB. Do we have access to the brains behind that $2,000 number? Why is it 2,000 the CERB? Why not 1,500? Why not 2,500? How did they arrive at that $2,000?
That I don't know, Brian, to be honest. What we know is the federal benefit was just determined. And if anybody even had any income, it could be a very small income, and they lost that, they were eligible for it. So that's the artificial floor that we are seeing right now. Why would you stay on social assistance unless, because your needs are being met with your health card for your drug benefit, right? There's lots of other ways that your needs are being met if that's what was keeping you on social assistance. So when that CERB falls off, that's what we're frightened about. We don't know what that world looks like. We don't know those numbers, so we can't determine what the impact is. But it makes me furious thinking that $2,000 is the allocated amount, and yet we're in this holding pattern of 700, under $750. It doesn't make sense at all.
So how long has that number been intact? Like I'm sure when Francesca starts to speak, she's going to talk about all the increases in gas and electric and on and on and on. How long have we been at the 733?
I'm going to say that the last time we had a rate increase was 2018. And prior to that, so I don't know if you guys have a memory about Minister Tabucchi, and back in the day with Mike Harris, he slashed the rates, right? There was a time in the 90s when we were at, I think it was $650, and he slashed it to $525 for a single person in one fell swoop. And so we've been slowly returning, but it's a very slow creep.
Barbara, remember the dented tuna cans very,
Remember?
very well. Okay, Councillor O'Leary, are you finished?
No, that's good. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm very glad we're having the discussion around a universal basic income right now. It's more than ever, the pandemic has sort of shown that not only is it necessary or is it important, but it is necessary. So especially in rural areas where there's different challenges. A couple of points were touched upon, and I was hoping Barb would maybe be able to expand on that a little bit. One of them was the van service that we've been providing, and the fact that there hasn't been as many people using it because of the pandemic. My question in regards to that is, are we expecting the service to be used less and less as we put more money into our transit system as we move along, and we create a more dependable, more efficient transit system across Grey Bruce? My second question is with regards to the meal programs at school. And it was mentioned that the meal programs are running out of money. Is there something that we can do as a county in partnership with our lower tier municipalities to ensure that that doesn't happen? At the end of the day, these kids are the future of not just our municipalities, but also of this province and this country. So it's important that they're not worrying about where they're going to get a full meal from. And so if there's something that we can do as a county in partnership with our lower tiers to make sure that this is not a problem, I think we should look into doing that. So those are the two questions that I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for those questions. I'll take the first one with the van inquiry. We think how we see our van as part of the county program. And so we would be able to move our folks to a stop to be able to get on the other vehicle. That's the plan. We do actually have a second backup driver. And so when we were in full swing, we would have one in the north and one in the south, and we were moving people to adult learning programs. We were moving them to placements. We were moving them to training sessions. We would get people to appointments. But we want to connect to the transit program that is operating through Stephanie. And certainly we could take some pressure off. We just see it as a part of it. It's not a separate piece. And so we're really happy that the transit program is in place. And we know that as we continue and people, once we are in recovery phase, we will be in renewal, we'll be able to make those connections. Right now, if someone doesn't have other means or ways of getting somewhere, we are taking people, but it's not on a regular basis. So that's the reason I wanted you to know how else we're utilizing our transportation program. The other piece you asked about was, Councillor Desai, was the nutrition program. And I know Francesca's going to talk more about that. And she has been intrinsic, United Way has been intrinsic in the feeding our communities. And certainly the distribution of these, this is just one small component, this school program, but we will find a way and means to keep to help support the system. I don't have at this time any access to the information as far as what other programs are coming to us. We continue to get announcements, but I do think that you'll have more information when Francesca's speaking to this.
Thank you. Other questions, Council? I should say
Sure.
committee
Mr.
members,
Chair,
this is not Council, task force members.
Mr. Chair, I think I saw a chat message from Francesca saying that she could answer the breakfast program question. I was just wondering if we wanted to do that now or wait until she presents.
I've been watching Francesca very, very well. She's been nodding her head and moving her body, and she's like a racehorse that you're trying to keep me at that gate, just itching to go. Perhaps with your leave, Francesca, I would wait until you make your present. I'm sure you've been taking notes and you'll address some of the things that have been raised. Would that be okay with you? Excellent. Are there any other questions? I had a comment with respect to the one-stop shop, and I've been flogging this idea for years about, could we have the county and the lower tiers and maybe even the provincial and federal pieces come together to have a place where we can have, you come here and all of the services are really there. I'm sure that smart people can work out the finances about, who pays for what and, how the rent works. But, I'm happy to have a downtown location in Hanover for Grey County Social Services. But, some people go there, they have to go to the municipality just, a block away for other services. Anyways, it's something I would love to see us put our heads around. Is there a way for us to work together so that people come to that one central location, and regardless of what you're looking for, it's probably going to be there. It's not a new idea, but I keep coming back to it, it seems. Anyhow,
we like it too. We like it too, Buck. And so I think that there is opportunity as we continue forward. It just makes sense.
Okay, with that said, I don't see any other hands up. So Francesca, you are ready to go to the races. You have the floor. You're going to be providing us with an update on Grey Bruce United Way.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today. I think one of the fringe benefits people will recognize with Zoom is they actually can mute me. So this has been a real struggle for the last 9 months. So let me get to the breakfast program question first, because I think I allude to it briefly in my presentation, but not in the depth that you certainly have been asking questions about. So I'm going to give you some numbers. So in Grey Bruce, they feed 15,600 kids a day, breakfast. That is a nutritious snack. The provincial funding for that program is 13 cents a child. And it's been always augmented by the individual school programs. They do their own fundraising, they get donated food, they have volunteers, all of that. Now, of course, COVID shut it all down. So what the challenge is now with that program is the cost is about $1.25 per child. So I have some information from up the peninsula, 52 cents for a muffin, 48 cents for oranges and apples. Cheese strings are 50 cents as well. And what the health unit, what the Ontario Student Nutrition Program, it needs 3 kind of food groups. So a dairy, a fruit, and some grain. So the cost is about $1.25 per child right now, because it all has to be COVID safe. So it all has to be bundled up. It's tons of plastic and an incredible amount of waste that's going in right now to keep our students safe. And that's okay. But again, the difference between 13 cents and $1.25 is incredible. So we're extremely grateful to Bruce Power, who last week announced that they had contributed to Bruce Grey, I think it's about $86,000, 103 between Grey Bruce and Huron to support their program. And Huron's feeding about 4,000, I should say, 4,000 kids a day as well. If you do the math on this, if you take 15,600 children times $1.25 times the number of days that are left in the school year, it's about $2 million. So that's an incredible amount of money, because we can't do that volunteer piece. We can't do the donation piece. We can't do the fundraising piece and all of that. So there's some real challenges with feeding children. And you can see from Barb's number why we need to feed children, because there's a real struggle around it. And as housing prices go up and up and up, you can't cut your rent, you can't cut your utilities. So what do you cut? You cut your food budget. So I am going to share my screen and run through my presentation and kind of go back to the whole point here. So again, this is a brief overview of the United Way for the task force here. The United Way, these are our 3 national priorities: from poverty to possibility, healthy people, strong communities, and all that kids can be. 100% of all funds that are donated to the United Way stay in our community. There's no hive off to our national office or anything like that. We do support with a small stipend to our national office to support all things United Way across the country. But basically, if you donate to us, it stays inside Bruce and Grey counties, working in our community. So our mission is to meet the unmet needs in Bruce and Grey County. And you'll see a lot of that, of meeting unmet needs. And then, you know, if it's short term, if it's long term, sometimes things bubble up, and then we can move that project off onto another partner in our community, and they pick it up and run with it that way. And we do this by mobilizing volunteers and the financial resources of our community who are working on everything that we're working on. So I wanted to be really clear with this group how the United Way is funded. We are funded by donations. We're a registered charity. We are overseen by CRA. We're audited and all that fun stuff. We have a lot of grants, especially right now. We are running a lot of grants through the organization. And we also do incubation. So if we have a community committee that doesn't have a registered charitable number and they want to apply, say, to the community foundation who needs a registered charitable number, we will partner with them. We give them that financial oversight and due diligence part of it, but we also then support community pieces. So we are not a transfer payment agency whatsoever with any level of government, provincial, federal, and again, our municipal partners, upper and lower tier, it's always on a grant basis. So we have to go out and find the money to do all the things that we do in the community. So we're tremendous support from our community. And our core values, we really believe everyone matters. Everyone deserves a hopeful life. Everybody can help somebody else. And so by working together, we just make a stronger, inclusive, healthier community. But the challenge is we've been asked to support and provide basic needs for people for decades. The first food bank in Canada was opened as a temporary measure in 1981. So 40 years ago. In 1987, the Canadian food banks were created, the Canadian Association of Food Banks, to represent and coordinate food banks across the country. There are now over 700 food banks, 3,000 food programs available in Canada. We have 21, 24, depending on how you count them, food banks running right now in just Bruce Grey. And a lot of that has to do with transportation. So we have a small food bank in Chatsworth, for example, because people from Chatsworth can't necessarily get to the Salvation Army in Owen Sound to access food through that program. So we have, these really tiny food banks that are out in our community because people need them in their community. There are also 15 hot meal and frozen meal programs, and 10 of those are currently operating. And we launched yesterday our foodbrucegrey.com, where you can actually go and look. And if you want to look at this, we can do this through Zoom, at our data around the food around the pandemic response as well. So one of the things I always like to talk about with United Way, we put out fires, but we also work on the fire prevention side of things. And I couldn't come up with a really good graphic for fire prevention, so we're just eating fire instead. So we look after the immediate need. The house is on fire. And then we kind of ask, well, why is the house on fire? So this picture was taken by one of my staff at the end of 2017, and it just shows you these are the checks that we wrote to utility companies to pay utility bills. So in the 15 years that we've run our utility assistance program, we've done almost $3 million. We have to fundraise for the cordwood, the furnace oil, and the propane. There is no provincial program for that. That's close to $750,000 in those 15 years. And 32% of the supports that are needed by our community, we have to fundraise for because there isn't, again, that provincial program. There are provincial programs for natural gas and electricity. But in addition to those provincial programs for electricity and natural gas, another 1,500 households needed us to have fundraised dollars because they'd maxed out those provincial programs, but they still needed assistance. So you can we have pots of money, and you can only hit one pot of money every 12 months, but we may have 4 pots of money. So you can have 4 different ways of supporting. But we also then look at that fire prevention. What policy changes are needed and what customer service rules are needed, as well as any household things that are needed to change the situation. But one of the things that keeps me awake, well, here's this great quote from a former staff who's retired, and she texted me this. The family I just met with is so grateful for the load of wood that's coming. They burned the furniture the night before to stay warm, knowing they were going to meet with staff the next day and do the application with us. And that's just just insane that people were burning furniture to stay warm. So we look at solutions-based policy changes as well. It took us 10 years and lots of work with the former provincial government, the Ontario Energy Board, to get a formal winter disconnection ban in place. And this is our 3rd winter with that disconnection ban. That was really, really important because as the pandemic hit, we were able to then have quiet conversations and say, just keep it going. And the disconnection ban was actually extended through to the end of July because of the lockdown and the pandemic and the impending, economic fallout from all of that. We also advocated around with the Ontario Energy Board, who is on Yonge Street in Toronto, that load limiters. So what Hydro One used to do was they would have the ability to go out, put a load limiter on your meter, and you could only use 15 amperages of electricity at any given time. And the theory was it covered your fridge, it covered your heat source, your furnace, and then you could make coffee, or you could run the microwave, or you could cook dinner. But you couldn't make a pot of coffee while microwaving your toast or whatever. Why would you microwave toast? Because it would trip a breaker and you'd have to go out and reset the breaker that's on the side of the house. What we ran into was people who had wells, and sometimes the draw on a well pump would trip the breaker. If you flush the toilet while the furnace was running, it would trip the breaker. And we pointed out, it didn't work for rural, and they actually banned the load limiters. They cannot be used anymore. That's actually ingrained in the rules. And the other rule we advocated on that, again, doesn't always cost anybody any money, was don't disconnect people on Fridays. When people come home from work at 5 o'clock on a Friday and they're disconnected from their utilities and you can't get somebody out without either paying through the nose for after hours service that you can't afford in the first place, or you would have paid your bill, but is punitive. It's not about encouraging somebody to pay a bill. Disconnecting somebody on a Friday is punitive. We pointed this out with the Ontario Energy Board, so now there's actually a rule in there that you cannot disconnect somebody if there's not 24 hours of banking and the utility being open after the disconnection. So if Good Friday is the day, then you can't disconnect on Thursday because there's nobody open on Friday there. And it's that kind of policy change as well that makes a difference. And this is part of our policy work. This is our putting the preventing the fire piece. Barb talked about the text program for Ontario Works, and we were really honored to be the first text that was sent out on that system was called 211 if you want a backpack, which just popped into my phone because they put me in the list as well. So I get those texts. So it was kind of, oh, that's cool. So over 16 years, 28,000 backpacks with a value of to the parents of $1.8 million. That's what we've saved the parents through this program. I did a quick scan through our data. We know from where we can look, 2015 to 2019, 350 went into the Hanover area, and well over 2,000 into the Owen Sound area. That's not really good data because when we give 500 to Children's Aid, we have no idea what community they're going into. That's really looking at how many did the Hanover Food Bank take, Big Brothers Big Sisters, community living, that kind of thing. So it's not a great data piece to say, oh, only 350 went to Hanover. No, minimum of 350 went to Hanover. So part of our strength, and Barb alluded to this, is, and I always say this, I said, all we ever do is make coffee. We bring people together. We believe in partnership. We believe in collaboration. We bring people around the table and say, what's going on? What can we do? What are the resources available? What silos are you stuck in that maybe we can augment and move things around? So I'm going to run through one quick pandemic example. So working with Y Housing, we have a weekly housing and homeless call right now during the pandemic. What's going on? So the first few weeks, the call was all about how are we feeding the homeless? We've got O'Share here in Owen Sound. You can't go and sit down for a meal, but what's happening? We were in total lockdown. And so we then worked with our partners with Habitat for Humanity, who called us and said, we got 4 trucks, put us to work. So between Habitat and the Grey County van, we've been moving things around the county. We got the social services relief funding for this. So thank you, Anne Marie and Josh. So what we do, so every day at 4 o'clock, John from Habitat picks up from O'Share a hot meal and a lunch for the next day and drops it in coolers to whatever motels where Y Housing or Moequidon or the women's shelter have in the Owen Sound or Chatsworth Motel. And that happens every day. On Mondays, because nobody's had any food from us, Saturday, Sunday, John does a run in the morning and takes a lunch out to those motels. And they have provided over 4,000 meals from May to the end of October. We're waiting on the numbers for November. And those numbers have climbed. And this has enabled those folks to isolate in their hotel rooms. They're not milling around. They don't have to go out and search for food. They get a hot meal. It's nutritious. And they also get the communication that they're being looked after and people know they're there and we're working on this. And the feedback from the Y is that this is really impactful. But you can see it's taken all those partners to come together to make this happen. It's a huge amount of work for everybody involved, but the focus is to make sure people who are sheltering without homes in motels have food for the night. So running through our pandemic assistance, so what we've been able to pull together in terms of data, we know there's been at least $3.2 million in support out to the community through Bruce Power, through us, through the Community Foundation, through the 2 counties as well. We ourselves have run $1.2 million through the United Way, through all the grants that we have. And to give you a perspective on that, our entire audit last year was 1.2 million. So we've essentially run a second whole another United Way through our books with this pandemic. So it's been busy. What I've been able to drill down for you here in this graph is where the area of focus is. So you can see over half of the money has gone to food and food security issues. And again, going and looking at Food Bruce Gray will.com will show you where that's gone. Shelter's been a huge piece, and the social inclusion and learning. Councillor Milne asked early on about technology and libraries. We've been able to fund, we did a fund with a grant to the Owen Sound Library around Chromebooks. So they could go out and buy Chromebooks, and the Amazon Fire tablet's a really cheap tablet. It has video capacity so people can Zoom with each other, they can FaceTime with family, and they're about $100. They're not the $800 that an iPad is. The Amazon Fire tablet, we have bought so many of them. And that does the social inclusion and learning, and that's gone out through Community Living, has bought some, Alzheimer's bought some. Yeah, that's a big part of what we've been funding, is the ability to connect with each other. Health and hygiene, we've put new floors in at Canadian Mental Health here in Owen Sound, and one of the meal programs over in Port Elgin, they also got a new floor because the health unit said, you cannot clean this, the state this floor is in. And we said, well, we'll do that. $5,000 for a new floor over in Port Elgin. But really what worries me is whether someone eats tonight, if they're warm tonight, if the lights are on tonight, are they safe? Shouldn't depend on how good at fundraising the United Way is. We should not be providing a person's basic needs. We should be providing things like tablets and things like transportation and that recreation piece. We should not be making sure that somebody has heat tonight. We should not be making sure somebody has food tonight. I want to do the frills. I don't want to do those basic needs. And this is what keeps me up at night and keeps everybody motivated. So I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Francesca. Great presentation. I know that Councillor O'Leary has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Francesca. I just wanted to ask about funding. Of all the things you talked about, mostly donations, you don't mention United Way head office. What contributions do you get from head office?
What we get from head office is kind of a coordination. There's no drop down of funds from our national office. The national office doesn't even run a Donate to the United Way campaign. We are autonomous organizations. Each United Way has its own charitable number. So we're what they call a federated model. So for example, the Canadian Cancer Society has one charitable number for all of Canada, and then they have branch offices. Ours is, we are independent. We look after the needs in our community. So our United Way does what we do. Perth Huron does different things. There are things we will collaborate on because our communities can be quite similar. But we do respond very custom to our local needs. So what our national office does is it gives us a coordinated brand. They do a lot of government relations. 211 is now across Canada, which is pretty amazing. That's another United Way funded project. It's also funded by both counties locally here. And we've had it for 12 years, I believe, come February, that we've had that resource. And it's a United Way supported resource. 211, the license with the CRTC for 211 sits with the United Way of Canada. So I don't know if that...
Sorry, all the donations that go to United Way International, none of that money trickles down to people like you.
So if somebody, for example, so the big 5 banks do United Way campaigns. The staff person signs up for $1 off every pay. It goes in actually to the United Way of Toronto, who looks at the postal code and goes, that's a Bruce Gray. We're going to send the money to Bruce Gray. our national office, like I said, doesn't run campaigns. There's always a local United Way. So for us, we do the payroll campaign at Bruce Power. There are people at Bruce Power who donate to the Huron Perth United Way. We bring the money in here and we write Perth Huron a check.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I wonder, Mr. Chair, if I might.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you,
Mr.
Francesca,
Mann.
thank you, Francesca, for all your good work and the team that you have behind you. I'd be interested to hear your comments on the notion of a guaranteed income and how that might impact the need in Grey and Bruce counties.
So I did pop in the chat a link to Hugh Siegel article with the CBC. Hugh Siegel's been a huge proponent for many years about universal basic income. So there's two ways to find savings with a universal basic income. And one is, you fire Barb and all the team, like that's that savings is you reduce that burden piece. Everybody gets the basic income. There's no staff policing people's lives and doing all the paperwork and all of that. So that's the immediate cost savings. What's really hard to track then is the cost savings for ER visits, for other programs out there that, the increase in people being able to have their own food. So we saw this. So when you look at the graph on foodbrucegray.com, have I mentioned that? The food bank usage dipped June, July, and August. And that's CERB. That's the impact of CERB. People were able to choose their own food. They still could have gone to the food bank, but people want the dignity of choosing their own food. They want to pay their bills. And that's what the CERB it gave them to do. Like when they said, okay, we're going to restart up with disconnecting, we were like, okay, and we're looking at the phone. I'm like, why is the phone not ringing? People paid their bills. And now we're going into this winter and it's becoming a struggle and everything's climbing up again because it's a different program. So there's a lot of trade-offs on the health side of things when people have that universal basic income. There are piles of studies. When we had that study that was happening in Ontario, we were starting to get that information. People moved to better apartments, safer neighborhoods. They went back to school because they could go back to school and know that their bills were paid. Micro businesses, because they had all the business, their household costs taken care of. When they were creating small and micro business, they could roll whatever profit they were making back into that business and build that business because they didn't have to pull it out and run home and pay the hydro bill. It was all covered. So there is a definite economic impact on it, a positive one. There's also lots of cost savings around healthcare when people have healthy food, safe housing, when they can make positive choices about moving away from an abusive relationship. That's one of the things that this pandemic has really blown open is the domestic violence and the violence in our community. So there's real challenges to that. And there's lots and lots of positive studies. Hugh Siegel's work, he's run the numbers 6 ways a Sunday, that it will save us money if we do this.
So I wonder, and maybe this is a question to Kim and Anne-Marie and Barb, if she was still here, from a county perspective, is there any kind of an opportunity to run a Grey County or Grey Bruce guaranteed income? And I have no idea how you'd make that work, but if the good folks in Toronto or Ottawa haven't got the cahoons to do the job internationally or nationally or provincially, I don't know, is there something we can do here in that type of program locally?
So there are more people around this table that have better information. My gut instinct is right now, because if you give people more money, clawbacks. So we saw this with the CERB. We're coaching ODSP, do not do this. Do not go for the CERB until we know what's getting clawed back. And they clawed it back. So if the county turned around and said, we're going to give everybody on OW this amount of money, and the province went, yay, we'll claw that back and we'll save the money. But something like an advanced or enhanced rent subsidy program, because it's that cost of housing. So Anne-Marie, I'm looking at you. If something ran through the housing program in an enhanced rent subsidy program that can't be clawed back, because it's a direct payment to the landlord. It's not going through the individual's bank account, but they're saving that money, which then gives them that disposable income to do the food, to do the transportation, to do the micro business, because they've got more money in their household. That would be a hack that is Bruce Gray against what the provincial directives are.
But to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we're simply going to write people a check for more money. There's got to be some savings as well
That's the
in the
problem.
process.
Is
I know
it's
it's a
the
huge
health
problem.
system that saves the money, and it doesn't turn around and give it to, oh, hey, we had 10 less people in the ER last night, so I'm going to write a check to the food bank because, you know, they gave people healthy food and they didn't show up at the food bank. You know, we looked at trying to buy air conditioning and fans when people were trying to isolate at home and stuck at home, and we had a heat wave. And so, you know, if people could be cooler, they wouldn't go to the ER with heat stroke and heat related stress. But the hospital's not going to pay for the air conditioning, you know. And that's the siloed challenge of it all, is whether, you know, the county could come up with extra funding. It's whether the county would save the money. We as a society would save the money, but it wouldn't necessarily translate to the county.
Anne-Marie, you have something to add? We can't hear you. I know you're not muted, but we still can't hear you.
Nope.
Oh, there? Yeah. Nope.
Maybe, well,
So-
if Anne-Marie tries to resort herself out, I will just say one of the things in Barb's presentation, I asked her specifically to pull out the levy numbers. And I think we don't talk about that maybe as much as we should. And I think we need to watch where that's going, because that advocacy opportunity that we have to the province to see us through our property tax base putting more and more and more investment into something and yet falling farther and farther behind. I think that's the expectation from the public, that they would like us to bring that to the province's attention and to talk to them about maybe there's a different way of looking at this problem, because those numbers are substantial. And I know, are we getting the best value from that money? And, you know, and what does the future look like? Anne-Marie, I know you have a lot. There you go.
Good. Yeah, nothing changed except I logged in and logged out. So anyways, yes, the only thing I was going to talk about with the rent supplements is we do have a number of people on our wait list who are fine where they are. They just can't afford to be where they are. So utility or rent increases over the past few years have made it impossible for them to live there. So by providing that subsidy directly to the landlord, it does lessen the amount of units we would have to build in the long run in order to offer a huge RGI subsidy. So there is some benefit to rent supplement when it comes to that, but that's a smaller portion of our wait list. But yes, and actually we do run a rent supplement program. We have about 70 units right now, and we could probably use about another 100. So again, it would be that long-term benefit that we would see instead of entering into building, mortgage, upkeep, capital. There is a small number of people that would benefit from that. And that will be coming to my housing task force meeting next December 12th or whenever it is. There is a report on that too. Thank you for that segue, Francesca.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick response to Councillor Milne. I don't think it's fair to say that if we increase the rent subsidy or enhance the rent subsidy, that it's basically giving money away without seeing any savings. There's a number of studies that have been done that consistently show that people who are on the lower end of the income spectrum do not have offshore accounts, and they tend to spend the money they have on necessities or on goods and services. So in the long run, we would see people have not just security or housing security, due to which they would have an increased peace of mind, better mental health, they would also have more income to spend on other things in the community, which would lead to higher assessment values for the county and for the municipality. So I think providing that that enhanced rental subsidy isn't giving away money without seeing savings. I think the definition of savings is something that can be a little flexible, and if it is, then we do see some savings in the form of an increased assessment value. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Desai. As you will know, that I don't always articulate things the way they need to be done, and I appreciate you helping out of the hole that I fell into. So thank you.
Wow, that's big. That's big from you, Councillor. Our warden has been.
I'll take that as my birthday gift.
There you go. Our warden has been unusually quiet, so I'm going to give him a chance to speak if he wants to. But before that, I wanted to address the issue of clawback because I remember as a lawyer in family court, we used to, have people going after child support. And if I represented a male who was being asked for child support, I knew fully well that whatever child support he paid would be going directly, would be clawed back. It would have absolutely no benefit to the child. And that was a problem. That's now gone, I understand. So that was huge. I mean, a single woman with a child who receives, $230 a month in child support in the past would have that clawed back by the province, but today is able to actually receive that $230 in child support and actually put it towards the needs of the child. Very punitive. I remember that being. Anyways, I don't know if the warden is wanting to add anything. This is his opportunity if he would like.
I saw Mr. O'Leary. I saw Mr. O'Leary had his hand up.
Oh, there he is. Oh, Warden McQueen, you are muted.
I'm mute. I'm in my best behavior. You can tell. I'm not having good video here, so I'm always fascinated by Franziska on all her information. I find that she's a wealth of information. If nothing else, she should be writing volumes of books or ebooks, I guess, maybe for all the information. And she's such a great resource for us here in Grey County. But I will say that we last summer, Grey Highlands and the deputy mayor, I think, was part of the delegation which we presented to. I'm trying to think which minister it was now, about the idea of having guaranteed income, and we were received. But thank you, and I don't know if the deputy mayor would care to speak to it further, but we did raise that, and we did pass a motion at our council, and we did make that delegation to that minister of that same idea that you're referring to today about guaranteed income. So I don't know if the deputy mayor would like to speak to it further.
Thank you, Warden McQueen. I believe it was at AMO we made the delegation to Minister Todd Smith. He was the minister for something to do with children. I cannot recall the exact name of the ministry. I do apologize for that, but we did make that delegation, and we passed a motion at Grey Highlands Council in one of our summer meetings, asking that the province investigate the feasibility of doing a universal basic income and how that would work. Whether they work with the federal government or whether it's a provincial program only. We didn't really hear much back, and even when we did the delegation, it was received, and we were told that the immediate priority was, of course, getting everyone through the pandemic, which it's hard to argue against. But yeah, so it was received. I don't know if other municipalities have passed similar motions at their councils, but we did take that initial step.
Thank you. Francesca, I have a question for you. This is the Hanover-Owen Sound Task Force. So is there any input that you wanted to give specific to the experience in Owen Sound and Hanover?
I think where we're challenged around that is we'd love to see some of the things that we're doing here in Owen Sound, like that Meals to Motel program in Hanover, but we just don't have the capacity. Why housing doesn't have the capacity, there's no OSHARE, certainly that way. We do have frozen meal programs in that area distributing food, but again, it's that distance and who's available, to deliver programs. You alluded and Barb alluded at the beginning of this meeting that quite often the reason the Owen Sound numbers are high is this is where the services are. This is where the connections are. So that's a big piece of it is are people coming here? So, sometimes we have this conversation with Bruce County because they're like, well, there's not a lot of people in Bruce County that are challenged with these issues. And it's like, no, because the second the issue hits, they're here in Owen Sound. And we know there's not a lot of turnover in Hanover around housing that's affordable down there. So it's the push-pull of what's available. There's certainly a different kind of shopping between the two communities in terms of resources to low cost, whatever you want to go shopping. And I know the GTR is getting off the ground, but one of the challenges is you need a credit card to use it. You can't buy a ticket without a credit card. Well, low income people don't have credit cards. So that's a bit of a challenge and needs a workaround. And I know people
and we have one.
I knew people were working on that. I hadn't heard anything yet, but I knew this was not news. And one of the other things I want to highlight too is recognizing that the child tax credit and as Councillor Hicks said, talked about child support, those are incomes that will disappear. So we actually, as a United Way, do not consider them incomes. We've seen too many cases where child support's expected and it doesn't show up, or there's strings that come with that child support, and I won't go into those horror stories. But I remember when my youngest was still living at home, her birthday's in January, she's still in grade 12 and hasn't left home and is still eating, and she turned 18 and there goes your child tax credit. And I'm sitting there going, but she's still here. I still need to feed her. She still needs to go to school. And then there was, 3 years of college and all of that. So that's a challenge. We see a lot of that when children hit 18 around the loss of that child tax credit, because it is lifting families and children out of poverty, but it's something that can end. And, if there's a change in federal government and there's a change in policy and they say, you know what, we're going to cut that back because, my God, the deficit with the pandemic is unbelievable. Are we going to ask our low-income people to bear that burden even more? So when there's a policy opportunity to change things, we do not consider that income because the risk to those households for that income is just too precarious. So when we're doing our utilities, do you qualify? We don't care about child support. We don't care about the child tax credit. It's what can you depend on to qualify for these programs. I think Brian had another question too, but
You're
Mr.
on
Hicks,
mute.
you're on mute.
Oh, that helps. Thank you very much for your presentation. I don't see any other questions right now. Maybe I see, yes?
Mr. Chair, it's Brian. I just want to make a comment and then a question.
Okay.
I really try to be positive about the pandemic and maybe say that some things are going to come out really well with this, but I want to talk about something else that's not so positive. Francesca, you talked about people on CERB. Some people are proud, they get the CERB, they buy their own food. And the other side of that is OSHARE did a presentation to our council last night. And the number of meals that they're handing out has increased 300%. Excuse me. And so I have this fear that when we come out of this pandemic, the people that accepted CERB, the number of people that took CERB that weren't supposed to, the number of people that have overspent, does anyone share that fear with me that we're going to have a complete chaotic mess when we come out of the other end of this?
Terrified. absolutely terrified. We have tracked throughout both counties 100,000 meals, both frozen and hot meals, supporting people in our community. Church meals that pivoted from going once a month to once a week, and supporting families. We know there will be a reckoning. I have a financial literacy, and one thing to highlight is the Social Services Relief Fund has been amazing for all the things that we're doing, from both counties through the United Way. But I have a group of staff across 2 counties I'm referring to as the April Fools Club, because that funding all ends March 31st. And I have 3 staff that are funded till March 31st. I have a financial literacy staff that sits down with people and works them through what the CERB is. They're in constant contact with CRA around what's the CRA repayment policy if you actually didn't qualify, what's the clawbacks, how, what's the best interaction, is EI better than the CRB, all of those crazy interactions. And that's what Caroline does. And she's done March 31st, unless there's another announcement around funding. And that's another way that Grey County could continue to support these programs that are happening out there. And the same thing with OSHARE. Same thing with Alice at the Salvation Army. There's a pile of staff out in the community that are on these grants that will run out March 31st. And we have no wind quite yet of any formal wind. And I know Anne Marie has wind of what's coming next and what's pass the wind, Anne Marie. What's coming next in terms of helping us, support our community, because it's a little unnerving and it's crazy. And, we've got places like Bruce Power doing awesome work and supporting our community. We're picking up more face shields for the food banks and whatnot through NPX and King Carden. All of those pieces are really, really important, but I'm terrified for April 1st. And I'm terrified for, what happens when it all dries up and everybody turns to us and say, go find the money when, I don't have another 1.2 in my back pocket.
I'm not sure what we can do to prepare for that, because when it does happen, and I'm sure it will, all the other ugly things, suicide, violence, you name it, is going to be worse. I'm not sure.
We've had no COVID deaths, and we've had almost 20 opiate overdoses. We run this program, and I know Councillor O'Leary, we've talked about it with City Council. We've done a Sharps container grocery exchange with Safe and Sound, and we brought in 25,000 needles since June, off the streets, off the ground, back in for recycling. And our opiate crisis never went away with the pandemic. It's just gone through the roof. And we do not have, the public health staff available to help us with this because they're too busy doing contact tracing because people partied over Halloween. Sorry, forget we're live.
Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
I think Councillor O'Leary brings up a great point, and I would encourage the members of this committee to take a look at the Ontario Nonprofit Network, who does advocacy work on behalf of all nonprofits. This is a huge problem. It's been a huge problem forever. Both the province and the federal government have been completely reluctant to provide any kind of administrative funding when they provide a grant, which causes organizations like Francesca's to have to run in circles, constantly chasing the next grant so that there's enough money to be able to continue to exist. But they don't, when they get a grant, they don't get funding for administration. It's not like it's not enough money. It's like there's no money. And it's just inconceivable how they expect these organizations to be able to function if they don't have staff.
Right. Any other questions? Anne-Marie, you have some input?
I just wanted to comment too on the April Fools. We recognize that, the pandemic's not going to end on March 31st. So we have kept money for the next quarter in order to extend some of those positions. So yes, so April 1st is not going to be the drop deadline. Please contact Josh and myself, and we would be happy to extend funding And that's not just for you, that's with our mental health services, our emergency health, our emergency housing services, all the things that we have had to increase because of increased use. But in saying that, we probably have enough for another 6 months. So what happens then? At least it's going to get us a little further into the pandemic. But certainly there has to be, and I know the province is looking at that. They are doing a review of some of the programs that they have existing, but that kind of always worries me too. Is it going to pull from one pot into the next? I'm not sure, but certainly it is on their radar. As a service manager at meetings at the provincial level, we are constantly putting that message out there that April 1st, there's still going to be a pandemic. But locally, we do have some funds to get us through April Fools.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Francesca, thank you for your presentation. I see that Savannah, Stephanie, and Randy have all been quiet. Is there anything you folks want to add before I move on to any other business?
I don't have anything to add. Just there'll be lots of synergies between what we talked about today and what we'll talk about next task force for sure.
Very good. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, nothing to add. We've been just busy trying to take some notes down for sure. And just some fantastic discussion. And I don't know about the other folks on these meetings, but I learned so much just participating in these meetings. And so greatly appreciate all this information that each of the delegations bring forward each of these meetings. So thanks again, Francesca and Barb, who's no longer on the meeting, but thanks for your presentations.
Very good. Okay, we're moving on to other business. Is there any other business? Seeing none, item number 8 talks about our next meeting is going to be December 11th. So mark your calendars. And I agree with Randy. At each and every one of these meetings, I'm learning more about my community. It's like taking a university level masterclass and getting such an insight into, who we are and where the gaps are and what is needed.
Trying to like drink from a fire hose.
Yeah,
holy mackerel. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of good stuff.
And at each meeting, we pick up new buzz terms, don't we? Today it was employment transformation and life stabilization for me, anyways. Okay, folks.
I've been dealing with life stabilization all my life.
And look at you.
Yeah, look at it. Yeah, what a mess.
All right, folks. Thank you all very much for your time. Great meeting once again.
We do need a mover.
Oh, we need a mover to end. That's correct.
Mover and seconder, please.
Councillor Mill moves, seconded by Councillor Desai.
Oh, said fuck.
Sorry, I missed that. Anyways, so we have a mover and a seconder to adjourn. I'm sure everybody agrees. Have a great day. And thank you again. And thank you to staff and our presenters. Francesca, brilliant as usual. Cheers.
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.